What is up, friends? I've decided I want to go back and do some retroactive reviews for the first 3 seasons of BoJack Horseman, so today we're covering Season 1. Now, this will obviously be a little different than the other reviews since I've already seen 5 seasons of the show, so expect me to reference things that happen in future seasons of BoJack. Spoilers for Seasons 1 through 5. I personally still think that Season 1 is the weakest season of BoJack, but it's still really special. I think the show took a few episodes to find its tone and pacing, and that being said, it still does some really brilliant stuff to set up the series, like how this opening Charlie Rose interview establishes the philosophy of the entire show through BoJack talking about horsing around.
You get home from a long day of getting kicked in the urethra, you just want to watch a show about good, likable people who love each other.
He's right, that's why a lot of people watch TV, but that is absolutely not what we're going to get out of BoJack Horseman.
Where, no matter what happens, at the end of 30 minutes, everything's gonna turn out okay.
Even though the show has a cartoony facade starring literal animal people, the personal arcs are as real as they come, and that does not lead to happy endings. As I said earlier, the early episodes of BoJack struggle to find its tone and pacing, particularly this first episode. It's filled with cutaway gags a la Family Guy, which fortunately it started to stray away from down the line. Later it feels as though they only cut away to things that are really pertinent to the story, rather than just silly gags and jokes. But this bothered me most when we get an entire cutaway scene of BoJack and Princess Carolyn's breakup, which is fine in theory since it's an important story point, but my issue was that the scene was super long and it even had another cutaway gag within this cutaway. It was like Inception with cutaways, and by the time we got back to BoJack and Todd retelling the story, I had forgotten the entire thing was a cutaway. It was jarring and it felt off pace story-wise. The content of the scenes is actually good stuff, it was just the structure of the story that threw me off. This also leads me to a little production theory I developed the last couple times I watched this pilot. I think that maybe the role of Princess Carolyn changed while they were still making this first episode, and maybe they initially weren't meant to have broken up yet. This is just speculation, but the way that this breakup scene just seems to be weirdly inserted into the middle of another scene struck me as odd, and then we see Princess Carolyn is actually still just in BoJack's house after this. This was played as a joke that BoJack forgot to take her home, but the blocking makes it feel like a mistake or fix. Then later in the episode we see Princess Carolyn in BoJack's house again making breakfast. This is also played off as a gag as they just continue to have sex after breaking up, but part of me thinks that the breakup scene was either added or meant to be in a later episode. Regardless, it highlights some of the issues I have with this pilot. While I find the jokes, story, and characters to be really funny, the structure and pacing prevented me from loving the show right off the bat. It's funny to go back and see Todd as almost a voice of reason for BoJack, which in certain ways continued through later seasons, but he seems smarter in the pilot than he does later. I do also love that they establish early that he gets himself into some really insane predicaments, like this weird quinceañera thing. I think the highlight of the episode comes at the end when BoJack meets Diane. The entire episode he's been defending horsing around and reliving his glory days by watching it, but then he says this.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna throw away most of your adult life on some dumb sitcom, you might as well get a sweet house out of the deal, right?
This was the first time he was real and vulnerable in this entire pilot episode, and willing to admit that he has regrets. Overall, while the pilot has some issues, it does a great job setting up the story and characters, and the first few episodes really start to fine-tune the tone and pacing for the series. BoJack Hates the Troops is a fun episode that shows how stubborn he can be, and other than that, it didn't stand out a whole lot to me, other than it had some pretty good Patton Oswalt performance out of Neil McBeal, the Navy SEAL. The episode Prickly Muffin properly introduces us to Sarah Lynn and sets up the future of her relationship with BoJack, which obviously does not end well. There are actually an insane number of things in this episode that foreshadow her death, and it made it kind of a bummer to watch again. Here's BoJack's advice to her as a child.
The most important thing is you gotta give the people what they want, even if it kills you.
She straight up says stuff like this.
I can constantly just surround myself with sycophants and enablers until I die tragically young.
And this music video she's in takes place at the planetarium, which is the place that she ultimately dies. BoJack and Sarah Lynn hook up in this episode, which is captured by these paparazzi birds. Though this storyline sort of goes away quickly in this season, I absolutely expect that it will come up again in the future, and I think I'm going to touch on that in some future videos. The episode Zoe's and Zelda's was the first that I felt really nailed the series tone. I love the plot about Todd's rock opera, and the sequences where BoJack and Todd work through aspects of the story are some of my favorite. The music from his rock opera also just makes me laugh. This is also sort of the first twist ending with the reveal that BoJack elaborately sabotaged Todd's rock opera using character actress Margot Martindale. I have said this before, but I really hope Todd gets to make his rock opera again one day because it was cute, it was fun. I want to see it happen. I want him to succeed, so hopefully one day it does. Live Fast, Diane Nguyen was a great episode that really helped us get to know Diane a little bit better. We're introduced to her family, get a glimpse of what life was like for her growing up, and see a pretty epic breakdown. I love the scene between BoJack and Diane at the end of this episode. It's really sweet and heartfelt and helps establish the genuine friendship between them moving forward. Todd's Boreanaz house scheme remains one of my favorite things the show has ever done. It's just such a dumb, silly idea, and it makes me laugh every damn time. I also love that he literally is sent to jail because of it. That's freaking funny. Our A Story is a D Story is another classic episode and the birthplace of Holly Woo itself. Now, I don't love the old love triangle trope, but I actually think in the context of BoJack it makes a ton of sense. Diane actually listens to BoJack. Sometimes he opens up to her in ways that he's unable to open up to others, and that obviously is going to lead to some sort of attraction between him. The episode ends with Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter actually getting engaged, which leads to the following episode as BoJack goes on a massive bender. Even though I completely understand BoJack's infatuation for Diane from a character standpoint, I didn't love that so much of the season was kind of centered around it. Say Anything is a Princess Carolyn-centric episode and might be my favorite in season 1. Seeing PC crash so thoroughly in every aspect of her life only to bounce back in such an epic fashion was unbelievably satisfying and highlights why I love the character so much. Cats always land on their feet. But, of course, even with her amazing successes, she doesn't get the credit she deserves. The final scene of the episode hits me every time as the clock strikes midnight and we realize it's her birthday. I think this episode is a pretty accurate microcosm of PC's life throughout the show. She's constantly facing adversity, but she's also a badass go-getter who will do whatever it takes to get back on her feet. She'll also never really get the credit she deserves, and her successes might not last all that long. She will definitely always keep fighting, though. That's what I love about PC. The Telescope is definitely one of the most emotionally taxing episodes as BoJack goes to see Herb Kazaz, the creator of Horseman Around. We learn the backstory of their strained relationship as BoJack did not stand up for Herb when he was publicly shamed and fired from Horseman Around. As we learn, this was less about the job that Herb lost and more about the friend that he lost. It leads to probably one of the most profound moments in the series and one that always sticks with me.
But what I needed then was a friend. And you abandoned me. And I will never forgive you for that.
Was BoJack actually sorry for what he did? Did he deserve forgiveness, or was he just trying to rid himself of the crippling guilt since Herb was dying? Just don't f people over, folks. Be good, be kind. At the end of the episode, BoJack has a little anxiety breakdown and then kisses Diane. Right after he realizes he's ruined a relationship forever, he makes a pretty messed up mistake in another one, and probably the most important he has in that moment. In this part of his life, Diane is the Herb. Herb wrote his show, and Diane is writing his book, and how the world perceives him was in both of their hands in these different times in his life. The following episode sees BoJack try and sabotage Diane's wedding, and every step of the way he actually just solidifies it, and even moves the date up drastically through his actions. But my favorite part of this episode is when Todd is hired by Mr. Peanut Butter to be his driver, the beginning of PB Livin' Baby. They have one of my favorite relationships in the series, and I honestly hope we get to see more of them together in season 6 and beyond. This episode also introduced fan favorite Vincent Adultman, who I absolutely adore, and I know a lot of fans do too. We haven't seen any Vincent Adultman since season 3 at this point, and that kid has got to be getting a bit older, so I'm eager to see if he ever comes back in future seasons. In One Trick Pony, Diane finishes her BoJack book, also titled One Trick Pony, and BoJack is not very happy about it. Seeing how furious he is about how he's portrayed is a pretty good indication of his own self-loathing and insecurities. The entire season, BoJack has been talking about how his book is going to make people love him again, and when he finally reads it, he can't even manage to like himself. It's a mirror of everything he hates about himself, but as Diane knows, it's more nuanced than that. BoJack's issues with himself are amplified because he already feels that self-loathing, but he doesn't realize that other people feel that too, and that ultimately he's relatable. This is an episode that tends to lead to my own self-reflection about myself and my own insecurities, and that's honestly just a sign that this is a brilliant TV show. Downer Ending is our first foray into the infamous 11th episode storylines that fuck us up every season. After firing Diane, BoJack tries to write his book himself within just a couple weeks. He recruits Todd and Sarah Lynn to go on a massive drug binge to help their writing process, which leads to some of the absolute coolest sequences in the entire series. We get fun moments like backwards talking Todd / Sarah Lynn like this. And of course, when played forwards, it says,
I'm talking backwards. Aaron Paul is dead.
And then there are these really crazy introspective trip sequences for BoJack that highlight his own demons, which include the Secretariat book Diane wrote, a headline saying Horseman Around was canceled, the telescope that Herb gave him, the D he stole from the Hollywood sign for Diane, Decathlon 7, which he obviously used to sabotage Todd, among other things. BoJack runs through some painful memories, including a day at school where everyone seems to be laughing at him. I wonder if we'll ever see more about this moment in future episodes, because the next memory is him waiting at a soccer field alone on a bench, and we actually see the scene play out in a flashback in season 5, after which BoJack's father Butterscotch just berates him in the car. BoJack also remembers a time in which his mother Beatrice forced him to go sing and dance for her supper club even though he didn't want to, and her dialogue was clearly something BoJack internalized for his entire life.
Nobody gives a damn what you feel. You've got an audience out there, and they want to hear you sing.
This is remarkably similar to what he tells Sarah Lynn back on the set of Horsing Around.
Your family will never understand you. Your lovers will leave you or try to change you. But your fans, you be good to them, and they'll be good to you.
I love the sequence where BoJack talks to Diane in the Peanuts animation style, and I think she says something really important in relation to BoJack's future on this series.
You can't force love, you blockhead. All you can do is be good to the people in your life and keep your heart open.
At the end of season 5, BoJack goes to rehab, and we see that he's actually accepting this advice. He wants to be better, and he wants to get better. And even after grappling with the horrible things he's done over the years, the things that might make it seem like it's too late to become a better person, he still makes the decision to try and get better. Whether or not it's too late for his career is one question, but regardless of how things play out with him in the eye of the public, BoJack is making the conscious decision to try and get better, even though he feels like he doesn't deserve it. The dream sequence where BoJack goes with Charlotte to Maine is also pretty heartbreaking, as it showcases the sort of happy ending that the series doesn't really even believe in. It begs the question, if BoJack had decided to move to Maine and pursue Charlotte instead of becoming a Hollywood star, would this type of ending even have been possible? There's no way it would have played out so perfectly, because that's just not true to life. And at the end of the day, happy endings like this might just be a dream. The ending is still one of the best moments of the series, as BoJack desperately begs Diane to tell him that he's a good person. He's seeking validation from the only person who knows him, and he doesn't get it because he doesn't deserve it. He ends up telling Diane that she can release the book. The final episode of the season starts with a flashback to Secretariat on the Dick Cavett show, reading a letter written to him by none other than BoJack. He gives BoJack some advice.
Don't you stop running, and don't you ever look behind you. There's nothing for you behind you. All that exists is what's ahead.
And then, 1 month later, after Secretariat is banned from racing, he kills himself. His philosophy was that there wasn't anything for him behind him. Everything was in front of him. Then, when all of the things in front of him were just taken away, he had nothing left to live for. I have a lot of feelings about how this might relate to BoJack in the future of the series, but I actually plan on covering that in a future video, so stay tuned for that. BoJack ends up winning a Golden Globe for his book One Trick Pony, which is honestly just a funny commentary on the Golden Globes themselves, but it's also the biggest award BoJack's ever won. After this, Diane gets an offer to be an on-location journalist for philanthropist Sebastian St. Clair, and Mr. Peanut Butter basically tells her she shouldn't and can't go. Even though the process played out over years, this is definitely the beginning of the end for Mr. PB and Diane's relationship. BoJack ends up auditioning for his dream role of Secretariat, even though he's twice as old as Secretariat was when he died. He actually lands his dream role, and he never would have if he hadn't been willing to be publicly vulnerable by releasing One Trick Pony. The season ends with BoJack watching one of the typical happy endings on an episode of Horsing Around, but he definitely seems a little empty, so he goes to the observatory where Herb gave him the telescope and changed his life forever, clutching on to the Golden Globe that gives him his validation. He looks out over LA, and an excellent first season of BoJack Horseman ends. Like I said, I think this season is flawed, but it ends pretty much perfectly. The show really found its own voice, and by the end of the season, we knew exactly what made this series unique and special. I think it rode its success pretty perfectly through the following 4 seasons, and I honestly don't think the series has lost steam at all, which is kind of a miracle. And on that note, folks, that is going to wrap up this retroactive Season 1 review of BoJack Horseman. I hope you like this breakdown and analysis, and you can expect a Season 2 review in the near future. I also have a handful of other BoJack videos I'm writing, so look forward to those as well. And make sure to comment, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, and I will catch you guys next time. Later.
Johnny!
Two cellos!